Good evening. Just letting a few more people join us from the waiting room and we'll get started. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Dr. Rebecca Hiscutt. I'm a dietitian and practice manager at Coombe Grove. This evening, we're going to be focusing on menopause. And I'm going to be talking about a different approach you can take to menopause to help you feel like you can take some control of the changes in hormones and the symptoms you may be experiencing. I really want this evening to feel like you've got lots of practical tools and strategies that you can put into place as soon as you would like to use them. Just want to say that everything we're talking about this evening isn't medical advice. This is hopefully just some really practical solutions and things that you might want to consider trying. Everything we're discussing this evening are things that everyone could consider, changes you could put into place, regardless of whether you decide now or in the future to use HRT. So I'm not talking about HRT this evening, but this is, for everyone, regardless of that decision. Please feel free to have your cameras on or off. It's always lovely to see some faces, but I want you to be comfortable. So whatever helps with that. We are going to have time at the end for your questions. So please pop your questions into the chat box at any point, and I will answer as many as I can when we get there at the end. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be talking about this evening. I'm going to be talking about basically who we're talking to, what we're talking about, and who this will help this evening. I'm going to run through some of the possible symptoms, some which maybe you really common to you may recognize, others that perhaps you hadn't necessarily attributed to menopause. And then I'm going to talk about how those link to metabolic health and the role of metabolic health in menopause. So I work at Coombe Grove and we are a centre for metabolic health. And so I want to sort of explain actually why we're talking about menopause at all. And this new approach to menopause is actually utilising, rebalancing our metabolic health. And actually that can be really, really powerful in helping us to calm the roller coaster of hormones and the roller coaster of what we're experiencing. So giving you strategies of how to do that and helping you feel really clear on what you could start with. Then I'll talk to you a little bit about the metabolic health programs we have at Coombe Grove. So if anyone wants to explore in a more detailed way, they can. And we'll finish with your questions at the end. So this webinar is really could be helpful for everyone. So if you are at that point where you've reached menopause, so if you are there or post-menopause, or if you're experiencing the symptoms of perimenopause, or perhaps are, trying to get yourself prepared, know what's ahead. So at any point, this is helpful. It will also be helpful for people supporting their partners or their loved ones so they know what is happening and what might be helpful for them. So this really is for women, really could be for people from 30, 35 upwards and right through the rest of their life. And certainly the people that come to Coombe Grove on our menopause programme, that's exactly what we find. Some people are right at the very early parts of perimenopause, and there's people who actually reach menopause a long time ago, but their symptoms are lingering. So in terms of symptoms, I'm sure it's different for every single one of you this evening, the symptoms that you may be experiencing. and how these are coming together. And it's amazing how the change in hormones affects every single person differently, you know, in terms of what symptoms come together, in what order, in the severity, and how long they last. So just sort of running through some of the main symptoms. Some of them that perhaps arrive early for people are some of these cognitive symptoms. So things like anxiety can be one of the first signs, actually. So not finding things quite as easy. For some people, things like developing anxiety around driving at night, driving on the motorway. These are some of the first signs. Anxiety around things that used to feel very comfortable about, possibly panic attacks for some women. Changes in mood as well. This is again can be one of the first symptoms that women experience. So that might be real changes in mood. It might be a low mood. It might be not feeling the same joy or happiness in the things that you used to experience. It might be finding things more emotional, changes in your moods, perhaps PMS symptoms being worse than they used to. Brain fog is something that lots of women tell me they're experiencing, and you know, this really big impact on their everyday life because they lose their confidence that they are going to be able to do what they want to do. They're going to be able to find the words that they need, that they're going to be able to do what they deliver. So in a work situation, that they are going to be able to present or talk to people, but in all situations too. Things like reduced motivations, so lots of mood changes. And then, you know, the impact this has on confidence for women can be huge. And then moving on to physical symptoms, you can see there is a long list of symptoms. And these can change as you move through the menopause journey, but obviously changes in your period. So change in the length of period, change in the bleeding that you might experience, again, can be an early sign, or for some people that might not have changed, but you're getting the other symptoms. Hot and cold sweats, and we'll come back to talk about this because there's a lot we can do to help with hot sweats, with flushes, you know, whatever time of the day or night you might be experiencing them. Sleep is a really big one, and very often that starts quite early as well in perimenopause, and then that really impacts the experience of other symptoms too. And again, there's a lot we can do. Fatigue, tiredness, you know, women feeling like they are trudging through the day. They just don't have the energy they need. Migraines, this again comes up a lot. So it might be women who have had hormonal migraines, and those continue or get worse, or it might be a new thing. Palpitations, this is really common. So feeling, and can be really concerning as well to get palpitations, to feel your heart racing, or to feel faint or dizzy. And again, there are things that you know can really help with nutrition to some of these. Aching muscles and joints, and sometimes we have no idea this is linked to hormonal changes. But it can be in all sorts of different places. So it could be hip, it can be knee, it can be shoulder, it can be frozen shoulder, but a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain that changes what you're able to do on a day-to-day. Hair and skin and eye changes as well, because hormones such as estrogen, you know, they're affecting every single cell and every part of our body. So when it starts changing, we can experience the changes everywhere. So thinning hair, drier hair, skin losing its elasticity, itchy ears, but also with ears, tinnitus as well, so a ringing in the ears can be associated with menopause. And I'm aware at the moment I'm listing lots of things that really aren't a joy. We are very soon going to get onto the things you can do to help your experience of this, so we will not linger. I just want to make sure for some of you, and I can see in the comments, you know, not necessarily knowing that these are linked to perimenopause, and I think it's really, really helpful to know that, because then and you, instead of thinking, oh my goodness, it's just me getting older, I'm just getting older and I'm not very old, you know that it could well be due to hormonal changes, and then you can put something in place about that. So rather than this feeling depressing, I want this to feel empowering, because we're very soon going to get on to what you can do to get your power back. Dry mouth, metallic taste in the mouth. So if you've experienced any changes in how things are tasting, in how your mouth is. We talked about changes in hair and skin, things like spots, so you might feel a bit like a teenager again. Restless legs, this can cause, you know, huge problems for people with sleeping when they get this feeling in their legs that's really uncomfortable. For some women, allergies might come back, and digestive changes. So a lot of women I speak to find that they can't tolerate the foods they used to tolerate, and they become more sensitive to different foods. And again, this is often around the time of perimenopause. Weight gain. So women will say to me that I'm doing the same things I always did. I haven't changed anything, yet my weight is just creeping up and up, particularly around the waist. Or all the things I used to do no longer have any effect. So something's changed, and we will dig into that this evening as well. So vaginal symptoms as well, which and more than a hindrance, a real problem for an awful lot of women. And that's something that if you are experiencing, I'd encourage you to go and see your GP, because there's a lot you can do to help with that. And a loss or a change of libido as well is incredibly common. So if you are, have you noticed any changes in any of these things, then please be assured that, you know, it may well be due to perimenopause. Don't assume, obviously, if it's something you want to investigate further, but there are things we can do about all of that. And just looking in the comments, I can see that you are resonating with these symptoms, and I'm sorry that you are, because you know they're difficult, and when you have one of these it's hard enough, but when you have several of these things, it can make life really difficult. So yeah, changes, definitely changes in hair everywhere. Frozen shoulder, yeah, frozen shoulder is really common with menopause. Itchiness, again, yes, itchiness continues too. Cold flashes and dryness. Okay, so I'm hoping some of the things we talk about tonight can really help with some of these things. Okay, so lots and lots of resonating with these symptoms. So how can we relate? I'm sorry about the lines on the page. I'm not sure if I'm able to delete them, so please ignore them. Metabolic health and menopause. How do the two link, and what does this mean for you? So I wanted to first just run through what metabolic health is, so we can talk about how it's linked. So if this isn't a term you've come across yet, metabolic health is basically it's what's helping you tick, what's helping you run every day. It is your engine, and it's your body's ability to store, release, and use fuel. So use the food you're eating whilst being able to thrive and maintain balance. So it's everything that happens from the moment you eat some food to that food being digested, processed, and stored or used. And your body is doing all that, and it has to try and maintain balance or homeostasis as much as is possible, because you need everything to remain balanced within your body in order to stay well. And if your body is able to do that and maintain balance, and I mean balance in terms of things like your blood sugar levels, the levels of fat in your blood, even things like temperature, It's working really hard to keep making these adjustments. So if it can do that, then you have good metabolic health. Now, our metabolic health can be measured with things like our waist to height ratio. It can be measured by levels of our blood sugar levels. It can be measured by the fats in our blood. It can be measured by blood pressure. These are some of the common measures of metabolic health. And if they are all within normal or healthy limits, then you have good metabolic health. Now, GPs in the UK, they estimate that around 88% of people in the UK, adults in the UK, have imbalanced metabolic health. So what we're talking about now and this evening is most of us. And particularly when we're around perimenopause age, menopause age, and our metabolic health may have taken a hit because life has been busy or stressful and we're balancing a lot, then the chances are metabolic health might not be as strong and as balanced as it was. So this is what we're aiming for. Your body is aiming every single day to maintain this balance, to get things back to level as quickly as possible. Because when it does this, you can focus on repair. You can focus on stabilizing your hormones. Your body can work on reducing the symptoms of menopause. Your body can burn fat rather than storing fat. So all of those things that help keep us thriving and very well. Now, metabolic health is linked to menopause because when we approach perimenopause and our hormones start changing, as estrogen levels fall, this causes an increase in insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is fundamental to metabolic health. When we become more insulin resistant, our metabolic health basically becomes more imbalanced. And we see insulin resistance increase often around the age of 40, so often around the age of perimenopause. And when we develop insulin resistance, this will exacerbate all the symptoms of menopause. So this is very simplistic. There's lots of other things going on, but when estrogen levels come down, estrogen levels affect every cell. One of the things they affect is how well we can utilize insulin. And that has lots of ongoing consequences. Now, I just wanted to briefly run through what happens with insulin resistance because it is so central to metabolic health and it is so central to your experience of menopause. So insulin is a hormone which is incredibly important for lots of reasons. One of the ones we know most about is that it helps our body to be able to access our energy. So it helps glucose get from our blood into our cells. Now, there's a picture of a door on the slide, and that's because what insulin does is it acts as basically being able to transport glucose from our blood into our cells. So it opens and unlocks the doors to our cells. After we eat, the food and carbohydrate foods are broken down into glucose. Our glucose levels rise. Insulin is released. Now, insulin takes the glucose, and what it does is it knocks on the door to our cells. They will open, our glucose goes into our cells, and our blood glucose levels come back down, which is brilliant. That's what we want to happen. Over time, and as we approach perimenopause, as we discussed, our body becomes more resistant to insulin. So now what happens is we eat, our blood glucose levels go up, insulin is released, but now when insulin knocks on the door of our cells, the doors don't really want to open because they've got enough insulin and because there's lots of inflammation and because insulin isn't working as well because of our changing hormones. So now what happens is our glucose levels stay higher for longer, and they can start to cause damage and effects in the body, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, we need to bring glucose back down, otherwise it's going to cause us harm. So our body produces more insulin, and when there's higher amounts of insulin, begrudgingly, the doors to the cells will open, and our glucose can go in, and our blood glucose levels will come down a little bit, but they might not come down as much as we want them to. And this is when if we had a blood test, we might see that our fasting blood glucose levels were higher than we'd like them to be, or we might have raised HbA1c levels, or they might be perfectly normal because our body has worked really hard and it's produced more insulin. So it's keeping glucose within normal levels, but insulin is much higher, and that's causing a bit of a storm and an imbalance in your body. So insulin resistance, so you've got higher levels of insulin working really hard. This might have led to blood glucose levels being higher, or your body might be managing that at the moment. But when insulin, it's not working effectively, when we become insulin resistant, these are the symptoms that you might experience. This is what insulin resistance shows up as. So feeling tired, feeling sluggish, because your energy, your glucose, isn't getting into your cells to give you that energy. Imbalanced mood, feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression, feeling hungry often, every few hours feeling hungry, eating a meal and feeling like having something to eat straight away, cravings for certain foods. And again, part of the reason for this is because your body isn't able to access the energy you need. It's getting stuck. It's not able to get into your cells. Aches and pains. So we talked about menopause, having joint pain. Well, insulin resistance also gives joint pain, and that's going to further build on those symptoms. Foggy headedness, loss of concentration, skin and hair changes, because when blood glucose levels are higher, this can over time damage our small blood vessels, and that's our blood vessels going to our skin and our hair everywhere. What can also happen is when our blood glucose levels are higher for longer, some of this glucose basically reacts with some proteins in our body and causes them to be damaged and not work effectively. And one example of protein is collagen. So if collagen isn't working properly, this is going to affect, for example, how your skin functions and how it works. Hot flushes can become more dramatic, more frequent with insulin resistance. Weight gain, and particularly around the abdomen, visceral weight gain, because when we are insulin resistant, we have higher levels of insulin, and insulin is a fat storage hormone. So you will be storing fat when your insulin is high. And this is very often why it feels like there's nothing you can do and your weight will increase or you can't lose weight. It's because there's insulin resistance going on, and therefore your body is stuck. It's like the gear stick is stuck in storage mode. So if we can reduce the insulin resistance, we can tip the gear stick back into burning mode. So hopefully this gives you a picture of insulin resistance. Now, this is happening all over the body, but it's also happening in the brain. So our cells in our body are struggling to get the energy we need, making us feel tired. But our brain is also struggling to access the energy that we need in a lovely, consistent way. And the impact of this is that we might have a low mood, we might have anxiety. So these sort of changes in how we feel in our mood, we can also see a link to insulin resistance. Now, what you might notice is very clearly the symptoms of insulin resistance are mirroring a lot of the symptoms of menopause. And these two things are happening simultaneously. So we're having changes in how our insulin works. At the same time, our hormones are beginning to shift. So what we see really clearly is that when women work on balancing their metabolic health, and what that does is it increases how their insulin works, all these symptoms reduce and go away. And then suddenly their symptoms of menopause, very often, a lot of them are improving as well. So it's a great way to take control of some of these symptoms. So this is what it can feel like with those menopause symptoms, and then with insulin resistance compounding those. It can feel like, well, things are all over the place in terms of where your hormones are at different times, and also how you're feeling during the day and during the night. So what we want to do is to, utilize metabolic health to give you back stability, give you back a feeling of control, give you back that feeling of strength and calm. And so this is the approach to menopause that we utilize at Coombe Grove. It's helping you to rebalance your metabolic health. And by doing that, we're helping reduce inflammation, we're helping to reduce insulin resistance, we're helping your body to utilize its energy better. And what that is doing, it's taking away all the noise and helping you feel much more in tune with how your body is, and make it much easier to see what you can do to help. So I wanted to just share this with you. This is actually a really lovely experience. One of the women who's doing our Coombe Grove at Home program shared with us just this week, because this links very clearly to hormones. So Amanda has been for a long time experiencing migraines, which were linked to a monthly menstrual cycle. So she knew it was coming. She knew she'd get these migraines, and they were impacting every part of her life. And she didn't know that by making these changes to a metabolic journey, this was going to impact the symptoms so dramatically. And she's barely experienced any migraines at all. And that change in her pain is also impacting her energy level, how she can think, her overall health, and taking away the fear of when the next migraine is going to come and what it's going to affect. So I wanted to just show you how clear this link is, and the changes that Amanda has been making. She's now in week 9 of a 12-week program, but this happened quite early on. Are the changes I'm going to be talking about this evening are making changes to support metabolic balance. Okay, so at Coombe Grove, we use the 5 roots of metabolic health to help people to become more metabolically balanced, to reduce insulin resistance. So those 5 roots are nutrition, movement, sleep, environment, and mindset. And we work with each person to see where the priority is, where the need is. And very often it's across, several of these or all of these, but it's about where we begin. Nutrition is our taproot, because that's the one which has the biggest impact. That's the one we're feeding our body with ingredients which are going to impact every single process, the proteins that are made, the hormones that are built, and how all of that is running. But the other 4 roots are crucially important too. And it's when we put these together that the fastest changes and the most dramatic changes are made. Now, sometimes in the past, people have may have spoken about these things as being almost soft things, things that aren't as powerful as medications, but actually, the research that we're using in what we're doing is showing that the changes across these roots can be independently as powerful as some of the medications. And when you put them together, it can be phenomenal. And what we're doing is we're getting to the core root of what's causing you to not feel as good as you want to, and the core root of these symptoms, because we are looking at insulin resistance and we're rebalancing that. So we're not just sort of trying to sort of smooth things over. We're trying to address what the problem is and put that right. So I'm going to run through these 5 routes and give you what I think are the most powerful strategies for helping with the symptoms you might be experiencing. I'm going to touch on what I think are some of the most common symptoms, so try and help as many of you as possible. So I'm going to start with nutrition, and this is the one I'm going to talk about the most because it can have the biggest impact for the most people, but I want to just touch on the other routes as well. So I wanted to start with this. So this is our plate showing a balanced plate for good metabolic health that we use at Coombe Grove. Now, it might look slightly different to plate models you've seen before, and I'll go through this, but it's all based on the latest evidence to support metabolic health. Now, metabolic health, I talked about it this evening and how it can support you with menopause, but if you have good metabolic health, it will reduce your risk of pretty much every chronic condition, every modern condition. So that's things such as raised blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, a lot of cancers, diabetes, dementia, PCOS, and the list goes on and on. So we're not only talking about menopause this evening. The things we're talking about will support your daily experience and your well-being, but also long-term health. So a menopause diet. Now, it's not really a menopause diet. There's not really any such thing as a menopause diet, but what collection of food habits are going to be the most helpful for you at this point? So that's what this is. So the first thing I'd say is prioritizing protein. Protein really is going to be your helper throughout this entire journey and for the rest of your life, because protein equals stability. When we eat protein, it helps stabilize our blood glucose levels. If our blood glucose levels are really tipping up and down throughout the day, that impacts hugely how you'll feel. It's going to impact your energy, it's going to impact your appetite, it's going to impact your cravings, it's going to impact your mood. Now, our blood glucose levels are supposed to go up and down, that's what will happen. But if they are dramatically veering, then we're going to experience that as imbalances in how we feel. So having more protein at your meal will really help. Now you can see on the plate that we recommend 1/4 of your plate being protein foods. So that might mean some of you increasing the amount of protein you have at each meal. Now that protein could be whatever you like to eat. It could be meat, fish, cheese, dairy, eggs, and it might be tofu, tempeh, nuts, seeds, beans, and pulses, or it might be a mixture. But however it is, it's about having plenty of them. Now, the other reason that protein is so helpful is because it's essential. We need the amino acids, which are so important in helping us to build calming neurotransmitters that make us feel good. And we need protein to help us to maintain and stabilize our muscles. We will lose muscle unless we work quite hard as we age. So having enough protein is really going to support that. The next thing is to enjoy natural fats. And this is something that I think we work really hard with women particularly, because there's often a fear of fat. And fat becomes even more important as we reach perimenopause and beyond, because it's going to help our brain to function really well. Our brain is composed, the biggest component of it is actually fats, and it's a really important part of all the membranes. It's going to help to build your hormones. And as well as that, fat is going to make you feel good. When we eat fat in our foods, it's going to help us feel satisfied. It's going to help us enjoy that meal. And what that means is you're less likely to be thinking shortly afterwards, what else can I eat? And fancying something else. And if we can be full and satisfied from our meals, that's going to help reduce the amount of snacks we eat. and particularly processed snacks, which is, often the food that's available wherever we are. And that will really, really help you at that time, because processed foods, they are basically, our body has got used to overriding them. It doesn't, our body isn't able to use its appetite signals in the same way, and they don't make us feel satisfied. We know that processed foods have such a big impact on our gut health, on how our brain is functioning, on inflammation. And we want every single piece of food you're eating, as much as possible, to help nourish you and help quell inflammation and help to reduce insulin resistance, so that you have the very best chance each day of feeling full of vitality, of minimizing your symptoms, and of being able to live every single day to the max, to be able to get the most from it. So, enjoying natural fats. You can see on this plate model that the fats here are fats that come in their natural form. So that might be things like avocados, might be nuts, it might be seeds, it might be salmon and other fatty fish, it might be the fat on meat, it might be olive oil, it might be butter. Natural fats that your body will recognize and be able to utilize. So think of these like a condiment to your meals. And you might be able to use them more freely, particularly if you're having less carbohydrates. So you can see we recommend up to 15% of carbohydrate foods, and we individualize this to every person. So it depends what your metabolic health is like, what your goals are, how active you are, but carbohydrates and fats can both be individualized. And then you'll see the other big section on here are non-starchy vegetables. So that's things that are generally grown above the ground. So all your leaves, cabbage, kale, things like broccoli, cauliflower, things like fennel, peppers, loads of different foods to give your meals, make them beautiful, make them appealing, give you those phytonutrients, give you the fiber. Now, this combination of foods is going to help reduce blood sugar spikes. And I spoke before about how much your blood sugar is spiking is going to really impact how you feel during the day. We'll come back to that in a moment. A menopause diet also really needs to be making sure you feel excited about eating your meals and making you feel satisfied afterwards. Like I said, what we really want to help you to do is to have as much whole, real, nourishing food as possible that's full of the nutrients. It's going to help your body to work beautifully. So therefore, your meals being exciting, you loving them is really important. We know that if we get more enjoyment from a meal, again, we're going to be less likely to look for other things. And then the other thing that I really needed to just touch on, because I see it being so crucial to people making the changes and seeing the health changes they want, is planning and prepping, because this is what means from week to week people are able to mostly eat really good nourishing foods. It's just be one step ahead, particularly when you're busy, when you've got a lot on, and when you might have had a really bad night's sleep, or when you might just not be feeling great. It's even more important to spend a little bit of time prepping and knowing what you eat to make it as easy as possible. Now, I said I was going to come back to talking about blood sugar spikes, because they are a really powerful tool. If you can help to reduce your blood sugar spikes, this may help immensely with the symptoms you're experiencing. So there are several studies now linking blood sugar spikes to hot flushes or night sweats. And we see very often women are waking up in the early hours of the night covered in sweat. And for women who've worn a continuous glucose monitor, which is measuring their blood glucose levels, they can look back and they can see that there's been a real spike in their blood glucose levels. So if we can help you get more stability, this can be really, really effective in reducing how many hot flashes or night sweats you get, and how severe these are. and also stop these symptoms lingering long past menopause. So this is something I recommend looking into. It's not only changes in temperature this can help with, but also particularly the cognitive symptoms and things like foggy headedness, concentration, mood. So what can you do to reduce blood sugar spikes? So basically the things I've just spoken about. So making sure you have protein with each meal, particularly your first meal of your day. Including fiber-rich foods, that's going to help slow down the release of sugar into your bloodstream. So all the non-starchy vegetables, things like nuts and seeds and beans, if you tolerate them, things like berries. Utilizing natural fats, that again is going to slow down the release of food from your stomach and slow down the release of glucose into your bloodstream. Think about how much carbohydrate you're having in total, because carbohydrate is the food that is going to have the biggest impact on our blood sugar levels by far. All carbohydrates will be broken down into glucose molecules quickly and impact our blood sugar levels. So it's not just sugar, it's also starches that will impact our blood sugar levels. Now, this obviously depends how much carbohydrate you're having at the moment. But generally, as a population, we have a very high amount of carbohydrate. So it's very typical for us to have 250, 300 grams of carbohydrate a day or more. A low carbohydrate diet is 130 grams or less. So a good place to start is to reduce processed carbohydrates and snack as much as possible. And then to think about whether reducing this further would help with blood sugar spikes. And this really comes into reducing snacking too. Doesn't mean you can't snack. Snacking can work really well for some people, but every single time we eat something, our blood glucose levels are going to go up and our body is going to produce insulin. So every single time we do that, it's going to have an impact on our blood sugar and therefore insulin resistance and the symptoms we might be experiencing. If we want to bring insulin resistance down, it'd be really helpful to be thinking about when we're eating as well as what. So thinking about how often are you eating and also how many hours over the whole 24-hour period are you eating. And this can be super helpful for women throughout menopause, is to reduce the hours they're eating over. And it doesn't have to be dramatic at all, but it could be stopping eating 1 hour earlier in the evening. This can help over time to reduce insulin resistance, and it can also have an almighty effect on how well you sleep. And this is a really big deal for women throughout menopause. I'm sure a lot of you will know all too well. So that will be my big tip, is to see if you can stop eating, start with half an hour or an hour earlier in the evening to see how that impacts how you're sleeping. Okay, how am I doing for time? Okay, I will go through the last bits a bit quickly so we can answer some questions. So I wanted to give you an idea of what that might look like. Now, it could look like all sorts of things. There's lots and lots of different ways to eat. But just to give you an idea, it might be something like an omelette for breakfast, so getting the protein, getting the fats, maybe with some avocado to get some more fat, some kefir to get some probiotics to help support your gut. Lunch, I've put a salad in here, but you can see that I've put in lots of different sources of protein. And because I wanted to do a vegetarian meal to show you, you can see that when I've used plant-based proteins, I've put in several different sources. So there's lentils and walnuts and seeds giving protein, as well as some Stilton. So if you tend to have more plant-based protein, it will be really, really helpful to think about adding a secondary or a tertiary protein in order to get the protein up to the optimal level to support you. In the afternoon, you might want another little boost of protein and fat with some nuts and seeds. And then dinner, so again, we're focusing on the protein, having salmon, but equally it could be halloumi or tofu or pork chop. And then with lots of vegetables and some quinoa, which gives a bit more protein than other starches do. And then perhaps some berry and yogurt after dinner, and then having that soon after dinner, and then having this longer period of giving your body a break of eating before the next day. Okay, now this I think could be really helpful. What I've summarised are the key nutrients that are particularly important during menopause. There are lots more, but the ones that are particularly important for some of the symptoms you might be experiencing, or for the things that are particularly crucial, things like bone health, things like brain health, things like cardiovascular risk, which are particularly important at this time, and where you get those food sources from. Because I think this just then helps give us that reason to think about all of our meals, giving us many of these different ingredients as possible. Because, you know, if we are getting lots of food with iron in, for example, then that might help reduce palpitations. If we are thinking about getting plenty of foods with magnesium or omega-3 in, then that might help with some of our mood symptoms. It might help with some of our sleep. So this can be really powerful. And I wanted to show you that actually, if we look back to that plate model, then we can see a lot of these food sources coming up time and time again, and we see them in this model. So things that are coming up often are things like leafy green vegetables, things like meat, fish, eggs, olive oil. These are coming up time and time again. So seeing if you can make use of these in your meals likely to benefit you hugely. Okay, I'm going to do a little summary of the other 4 routes so that you can think about these or come back to these. So for movement, I'd say the key thing is to think about what movement do you need at this point? And it will change, and it will change whether you're just at the beginning of perimenopause and at each stage. But it might not be the same thing you needed 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I'd say what's really important with movement is thinking of it as one of the best medicines you can use to help you release stress and to help your mental health as well as physical health. So thinking not only about things like strength training, but thinking about being outside, doing gentle exercise, slow exercise, going for a walk, and what that's giving you. A top tip is to do some sort of activity after your evening meal, because as the day goes on, we become more insulin resistant. Our insulin doesn't work as well in the evening compared to the morning. So if we move after our evening meal, what that's going to do is our muscles are going to draw on the glucose from our blood and also to give them fuel, and it can help bring our blood glucose levels down. Now that can help to, obviously it's helping in the moment to bring blood glucose levels down, but it's also helping to reduce insulin resistance over time. So that can be really helpful. A couple of things to think about is that HIIT can be particularly helpful throughout menopause. So this means you can be really clever and do, you know, not take a huge amount of time, but be really effective in what you're doing. What I see a lot for women in menopause is they're doing a lot of exercise, which is causing stress. So for example, CrossFit, and their levels of stress are really high anyway, and menopause is causing more stress and cortisol levels are higher. And then they're doing exercise, which is causing cortisol levels to be higher. So it's just thinking about whether you need to tweak that and modify the types of exercise at all. With movement and with all of these routes, actually, it's about what you can do week after week. What are you going to enjoy doing? What can you keep doing? And break it down. It can be really small. So thinking about, you know, when can you do 20 squats, or when can you do a few minutes of using a kettlebell? And it's those things often that's easier to keep going. Muscle is really your best friend, because when we have more muscle, we live a longer, healthier life. It really is a great protector, and muscle is going to help your insulin to work better. So anything you can do to maintain or build your muscle is helpful. So sleep. So one of the biggest things I've already talked about, which is stopping eating earlier. The other key thing you can do for sleep is to really work with your 24-hour circadian rhythm. So if you can expose yourself to natural light within 30 minutes of waking up, that can help reset your circadian rhythm and help you produce the melatonin you need to sleep. If you can get outside, even better. Even if you just get outside with a cup of tea first thing for a few minutes, that's going to be a really, really helpful step. And then the other end of the day, I think something a lot of us will resonate with is that we're really busy and we're catching up on things, and maybe we're looking at emails, or maybe we're looking at screens, or maybe we're thinking about a million things. And then we go to bed and expect to fall asleep. And our brain really does need to go through a process of wind down and to change in order for us to do that. So build in time between you being awake, you relaxing, you doing things, and you thinking you're going to go to sleep. And if you can build in a transition and a set of things that you do, your body's going to recognize that. It's going to make it easier and easier. That's different for every person. It might be things like changing the lights. It might be things like turning off screens. It might be putting on music as a cue. It might be doing gentle exercise. It might be journaling and dumping some of your thoughts, but some sort of process that feels right for you. And then the other key takeaway for sleep, for menopause, is magnesium. So as a dietitian, I always encourage people to get nutrition through food, whatever possible, but magnesium is something that I see being really, really important throughout perimenopause and menopause. So it can help with lots of things. It can help with glucose balance. It can help with our mood. It can help our muscles to relax. It can help with sleep. So taking magnesium supplement and trying that and seeing how that helps you sleep can be very effective for a lot of women. Magnesium biglycinate is generally the one that works best for most women, but there are different types, so you should sort of check which one might be best for you. Okay, environment. So I think sometimes we are not aware of how huge the impact of the situation we're in, the places we're in, and the people we're surrounded by, how much that's impacting our hormones, how much that's impacting our glucose levels, our cortisol levels, and can impact insulin resistance. So a few little changes with your environment could make a really big difference on menopause symptoms. So a few quick tips for environment. Use your environment to help you. If you decide, actually, I want to put in some little activity snacks during the day, I want to build my muscle, I want to bring my blood glucose levels down, then put things around you to help with that. Get a skipping rope and leave that where you'll see it all the time. Get a kettlebell and put that somewhere. Put your trainers somewhere you're going to see them. It doesn't mean that every single time it's going to work, but you're much more likely to if you're seeing these cues. We know that being in nature can be really, really beneficial, particularly at perimenopause. It's really restful for our brain to be in an environment that's calming, that doesn't have as much to take in. So if you're able to at any point escape to green or to look at pictures of green, that can help bring cortisol down, which helps bring glucose down, which helps bring insulin resistance down. Taking micro breaks during the day can feel very feasible for people. So rather than going through the whole day and our battery becoming more and more depleted and stress building and building, we can release a little bit of that throughout the day. It's not going to have built up to such a great point by the end of the day when we're going to bed. So can you, for example, even if it's a 2-minute break and 2 minutes of going outside, or 2 minutes to write down what's happened today and how you feel about it, and just let yourself release some of the day. And then surround yourself with people who are prioritizing their health, because what the people around us are doing really, really rubs off on what we're doing. And it's so easy to think it's very normal to eat processed foods all day because everyone else is doing it. It very often feels very normal that there's cakes or biscuits or chocolates at work every day or for every celebration, because that's what everyone does. So if you're around people who are focusing on looking after themselves and nourishing themselves, and that's what they're doing, that will become normal too. Then finally, mindset, which is huge and can really make everything feel easier to make those big changes. So a couple of key things. If you can focus on doing your best today to look after you, then that is perfect. That is amazing. That will change every single day. Sometimes your best will be going for a walk or going for a class, cooking yourself something lovely, having all your meals prepared. Sometimes your best will be going outside for a minute with your cup of tea in the morning, and that's it, because that's all you can do today. But that is fine, because if you think I've done my best today, you're not giving yourself a hard time. It means you can carry on doing those things day after day, and that is when you'll make health changes that are sustainable. So trying to get away from this all or nothing, because that's really hard to maintain when our hormones are all over the place, when we might be experiencing symptoms. And then the other thing is reframing. So changing how you are talking to yourself, your thoughts. So instead of giving yourself a hard time, you are encouraging yourself by what you're thinking. And this will take practice, but at the moment, just be aware of it. So be aware if you think, oh, I have to do that. And instead say, I can do that. I get to do that. Seeing things as an opportunity rather than a punishment, I suppose. We as women, I'm sure men do too, but do a lot of shoulding. I should eat that. I should go out for a walk. All the shoulds you do. So if you find yourself shoulding, instead try and change that. I get to, I can. It really changes how we feel about doing things. And when you're out and it feels like, you know, there's everything around that it's going to make it harder for you to feel good, or that might trigger a blood sugar spike that might cause you a hot flush, instead look for the things that you can have that are going to support you. Because when we start to look for them, we can, you know, we can see them there. It's just that it can be lost amongst the huge array of processed foods that manufacturers are trying to get us to eat. So this is sort of a summary of some of those things. I wanted to give you, if you wanted to almost like a sort of a, not make any decisions, if you wanted things to be easy, I wanted to give you some ideas of where to start. So a really, really clear one that'd be really effective is having at least 30 grams of protein with your first meal. So to give you an idea, an egg is around 6 grams of protein. So it could be 3 eggs with some cheese and ham, for example. Or it could be having some cold meat in a little pot with some avocado and some tomatoes and some lettuce. Or it could be Greek yogurt with some nuts in. Lots of ways to get that protein in. And we know that protein at the first meal of the day can have a really big impact. Plan your meals and snacks for the next few days and see what a difference it makes how you eat. Reduce your eating window by an hour. Go for a walk after your evening meal, or do something else, do some squats, do some skipping. Insert micro breaks. Think tiny habits that feel like you can do them no matter what your day's like. and then tick them off on a chart on your phone, because when you tick them off, you'll get a boost in dopamine, and that will help your brain want to repeat it. And then reframe. Your focus is on helping to rebalance your body, to helping to nourish your body. It's not about anything else. It's about supporting you. So I will very briefly run through our metabolic health programs. I know we're running a bit behind, but I'll stay so that we can answer some of your questions. So if you're able to stay too, we will get to your questions. So as I said, I'm a dietitian working at Combe Grove. So this is Combe Grove in the picture on the left. So we are set just outside Bath, and we are a centre for metabolic health. So our webinars are something I love to do, because we are a charity and we want to share metabolic health with as many people as possible. So I'm hoping that everyone that comes this evening, comes to all our webinars, can go away and put some things in place to impact how they're feeling. But for some people, if they want some more personalised support and to really sort of delve into things more, then we have our programmes to do that. So we have our residential programs, and people come and stay with us at Combe Grove. And launched this year, we have Combe Grove at Home. So for people who aren't able to take the time out and want to make the changes within their everyday life, we now have that option too. So our residential programs are basically where people completely immerse themselves in metabolic health, in learning about them, and being an environment that's set up to rebalance metabolic health as quickly as possible. So obviously all the food you eat is going to be designed to help reduce insulin resistance as quickly as possible, help to reduce sugar cravings, help you get into a relaxed place. So our residential programs include a 5-night initial stay with us at Combe Grove, and then a return 3-night stay 3 months later. So we know that from the results of our clients that 12 weeks is a really good period of time for people to focus on, and knowing they're coming back after 12 weeks provides that really strong accountability. And then we can repeat health markers and see the difference, see the results, and make tweaks so you can carry on making the biggest changes. So this is what you might expect. So Fiona Duncan basically put her pre-diabetes back into remission, her blood pressure was normal, and she lost a lot of weight. But the changes will be different according to what your personal health goals are. So this is what's included in the metabolic health programme. So basically the 5-night initial stay, the 3-night return stay, both included, and everything within that. So it's all inclusive. So your meals, the programme, treatments, use of all the facilities is included. Our Combe Grove at Home programme we developed in order to provide the same experience, but for people who couldn't necessarily take the time to come to Combe Grove. So you are going to journey through metabolic health and the 5 routes. You're going to understand exactly where your metabolic health is and build your own personalised plan alongside your metabolic health coach, who's a dietitian, who will give you her time and her support throughout. You can message her at any point, but you're also going to have 3 in-depth 45-minute consultations with her to really work on what's important for you. And then you're going to get to know the group, and we found the group are really, really supporting each other throughout the whole experience. So these are a few experiences from our first cohort, who are now 9 weeks into their programme. And our second group of people started just last week. But you can see the results are really significant and making a big impact. So this is what the Combe Grove at Home programme includes. So it's 12 weeks of dedicated support, as well as that one-to-one and group support I talked about. There are 2 health checks, one at the beginning, one at the end, including blood tests, In the box that you'll receive at the beginning, you will have things like a body composition scales, blood pressure monitor, so that you can take these measurements, as well as tools and resources to help you with each of the 5 routes. You'll have a treatment and therapy and fortnightly live webinars in the evening to help guide you through those changes. So these are the 2 options. Our residential programme starts from £2,600 when it's an early bird price, and Coombe at Home with a webinar discount starts at £1,100. And you can book your place on either programme on our website. And for the residential programmes, you could do that with £300 deposit. And we do have webinar discounts available for the next 48 hours. So all this information is available on the website, and obviously you can contact me or talk to one of the team. But just in case you are wondering how you can use your discount, these are the next dates for a residential retreat. So when you can kick off your metabolic health journey, you can see you can use a £250 discount to bring those prices down. We do have a couple of early bird places available on our April retreat, when you can join us on a residential programme for £2,600. And that includes a 5-night stay and your return 3-night stay. If Coombe at Home would be helpful to you, our next programme starts in June. So if you wanted to secure one of those places, then you can, again, on our website. There's a £100 webinar discount available for the next 48 hours. So the discount code to use for either of those programmes is webinar. If you use that, you'll have the discount applied. So you can go to coombegrove.com. You can contact me. My email is rebecca.hiscutt@coombegrove.com. If you've got any questions, I'm really happy to talk through. Or you can use this QR code or go onto the website to book a call with a member of the nutrition team to talk through for you. Okay, I'm sorry I've overrun, but let's see if you've got questions that we can help you with. Yeah, I'm sorry, some of you have had to go. I understand. We will send you a recording of this evening, so if you've had to go, you can catch up. So Melanie has asked, I grew up believing that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Is this not the case? I noticed one of your Coombe Grove participants mentioned they've now dropped breakfast. Yes, so the changes that people have made are different for every single person. So just because they made these changes aren't necessarily the changes that you would have to make. But we do give people an opportunity to try time-restricted eating at Coombe Grove. So we have brunch at 10:45 and then an early dinner at 5:30. So therefore, we're giving people a very long overnight fast, and this is accelerating their metabolic balance and giving them a chance to experiment with this. Doesn't mean you've got to do it that way. So some people find that having breakfast a bit later is helpful to them. For other people, they love having breakfast, and they'll have breakfast and then they'll try and bring their eating window forward in the evening. So really, we'd work through what's going to work for you. But I think breakfast isn't necessarily at all the most helpful meal of the day for everyone. Actually, for a lot of people, not having breakfast and having that longer fasting period is really helpful and supports their metabolic health. It's about what suits you. I think breakfast being particularly important was a message that was really helpful in marketing campaigns of breakfast cereals and other products, but the science doesn't necessarily back it up. So Linda's asked, is Instantol helpful for insulin resistance, and what time of day is this supposed to take? Yes, it can be. That I think is an individual question. It's hard to answer in a general way. It depends on a lot of things. Yes, of course, you'll have a recording. Absolutely. We'll send that through tomorrow, I imagine. Sam has said, I found some conflicting information previously regarding intermittent fasting and menopause, but listening to what you said, it appears to me would be beneficial, especially with the right foods and eating window. Yeah, there is definitely different schools of thought around intermittent fasting, but it doesn't have to be anything dramatic, and certainly everyone or most people would benefit from having a time of eating and having a time of not eating, having some time where the body can repair. It can be helpful to flex any time restricted eating. If you do still have a cycle, flexing that with your cycle can be really supportive. But in terms of reducing your eating window, particularly in the evening, by an hour or so, it can be really, really helpful throughout menopause with sleep. Tina has said residential programs are around £3,500. Is it possible to look at day courses, as many may help and cannot afford 5 days? Yeah, absolutely. So the early bird discounts bring that down a lot. And then Coongrove at Home, one of the reasons we introduced that was to increase accessibility, but I realise it's still a lot of money. We are looking at introducing day courses for this very reason. So please let me know if you'd like details of that when we've got dates for you. Would love a visit to Bath, but I'm North Essex. Might you have any partner services or providers in North Essex? We don't. Coongrove is an independent charity. If you can get to Bath, we can come and pick you up from the train station, or you could use Coongrove at Home and we will send you Coongrove in a box and welcome you to the community that way. Somebody said about not being aware of insulin resistance in perimenopause. I know it's not talked about that much, but it is a really big deal. Amanda attends a menopause cafe, and where there's several around the country. Amanda, please feel free to pop it in the chat box where it is, because I'm sure lots of people would benefit from that. Sorry, just scrolling through questions. Magnesium biglycinate, I've taken it for 2 months and my sleep has improved enormously. Fantastic. I'm really glad that's working for you. That is the one that is most helpful to a lot of people. You might notice if you suddenly start taking that, you get really dramatic dreams. If you do, you can take it just a little bit sooner, earlier in the day. Have you tried tempeh? Oh, is that answering somebody's question? I imagine. Yes. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, tempeh is a fantastic source of protein. Stacey's saying about the importance of a sleep routine. Yeah, it's so easy for it to get lost with everything else. But if you can find something simple that works, it really does help. The other thing you might want to look into is a grounding mat. The research is going quite strong, can really help with sleep for some women as well. So somebody has said, I always thought starchy carbs should be 25%. Is there a reason why it's 15% on the diagram? Is this specific for menopause or any time of life? It's a great question. And we actually don't need any carbohydrate. It's non-essential. We need proteins and fats, they're essential, but our body can actually produce all the glucose it needs in order to run. So if we didn't have them, it would be fine. However, we sort of work with people as to how much carbohydrate they need for their particular life. So 15%, it is less than what you might generally see on the Eat Well plate. We've adjusted the plate model according to the latest evidence in metabolic health, and perhaps there'll be changes in wider guidelines in the future. Is intermittent fasting good when having perimenopause? It can be one of the tools that can be really helpful. Just experiment with what works for you, and you start really gently. It could be 30 minutes shorter eating window in the evening. Okay, I might stop there because I know we've run over. If I haven't answered your question and you really like me to, then please email me. I'll put my email in the chat box now, and I'll make sure that we get back to you. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, and thank you for your fantastic questions too. A grounding mat, I've just seen that one come in. A grounding mat, basically what it does is it connects to the earth, and basically it helps to rebalance your body. If you have a look, search it up, and you can look for the research papers. It's you know, there is a growing amount of research, and I just think it's really helpful to be as open as possible as to what things might be supportive. It's a very easy thing to put in place. But what it's doing is replicating connection to earth. So if we were to go outside with barefoot, for example, or to swim, we're getting that same benefit. But you can use a grounding mat while you're sleeping, for example. Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for joining me this evening. I hope you feel full of hope that there's things you can do to make a difference to how you're feeling. And I hope to meet some of you at Coombe Grove at some point. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.